Okay, this is the second half of the Monday show here, and this time I want to talk about the chemtrails. I want to talk about the chemtrails. Hey, knock it off. Knock it off. And let me do this. Let me do this here. Okay, we're recording again on that. All right. We got this in, and it's been a question for all of us. It's been a question for all of us here. That what do we do? What do we do? What about the chemtrails? Now, just as you said, nobody wants to believe this. Nobody wants to believe this. But this came in under the title, and it's linked on the website, so you can read it. Geoengineering, Chemtrails, HAARP, World Orders, Timelines, and Ascension. This is written by a man that goes by Daniel. He said, I was listening to exopolitics expert Alfred Labermont on his on a radio show, discussing the negative timeline as being some kind of synthetic quantum environment orchestrated by the gray ETs, stating that this negative timeline was all made up. Having worked as a technician on the Phoenix 2 project, look, make sure I'm on here. Phoenix 2 project, more commonly known as the time travel aspect of the Montauk project. I have first-hand knowledge of what was going on and what they are trying to do, and it appears they're using some of the knowledge gleaned from those experiments in geoengineering application. In the 20 years that have passed since those experiments, I've learned much and decided to take a look at it in the context of new knowledge provided by Dewey Larson's reciprocal system of physical theory. Phoenix 2 was a covert attempt to determine the nature of time, if it could be manipulated, and if so, the process to do it. Without going into details, the short answer is that those involved never came to an understanding of time other than it was not what conventional physics thought it was, but were able to make use of some technology obtained in order to perform temporal experiments into the future and past. In order to access time, a navigational computer from a faster-than-light propulsion system was utilized to open a portal from which a visual record could be made. Later experiments, a way was found to send living organisms through this portal and to other chronological periods, though this was highly dangerous and seldom worked as expected. Due to the nature of the equipment being used, only persons with highly developed psionic ability could operate the equipment. Psychics were skilled in precognition. One of the issues was that the time travel experiments ran into a bump, literally, crossing the 2012-2013 year boundary conventional calendar, and at the time it appeared to be some kind of artificial reality that was constructed by the psychic running the chair. The experts did not know what to make of it, but for the most part thought it was a realistic view of the period being viewed because it was consistent with different physics, and everyone sent forward returned with similar information. Looking at it now, it would be more consistent with a synthetic quantum environment, such as the one described by Labermont, than a natural one, which may explain why it was frozen past a specific point. From what we know now, there's a good deal of truth to what Labermont was discussing on that radio show. Research into the strange weather around the world, including the effects of red rain, abiotic stress of plants for sudden death, extreme levels of radiation, and ultraviolet light, to name but a few, may have turned up what is going on, and it ties in with the old Montauk project. The interpretation explains chemtrails, HAARP, geoengineering, underground cities, engineering, and even explains the timeline and upcoming ascension to a higher density. The connections cannot be seen by conventional science due to various misconceptions treated as fact, like Darwin stuff, with the information in Dewey Larson's book, Universe Motion Beyond Space and Time, and the follow-up articles written by Professor K. Nehru The nature of the stellar interior and sunspots, what is going on, starts to make a lot of sense. You think the politicians hide stuff? Try scientists. Most of the things going on are reaction to a larger event. Find the cause and the effect starts to make sense. So let's start with the most obvious effect, climate change. For that, we have to take a look at the single largest effect on weather, sunlight, and where it comes from, the sun. And reciprocal systems, physics, RS. Larson comes up with a better structure for the atom based on the concept of scalar motion. As a natural consequence of that structure determines two destructive limits for atoms, a thermal limit and an age limit. The thermal limit is the common limit used in thermonuclear reactions, but the age limit is unknown to conventional science and concerns the capture of charged electron neutrinos by the atom, which creates isotopic mass. When the age limit is reached, an element becomes radioactive and explodes. When Larson applied these concepts to astronomy, he found a different mechanism for stellar combustion based on these limits. Combustion is based on exploding atoms. Fission, not fusion. And that led to the conclusion that astronomers have the stellar and galactic evolution sequence backwards. In Universe of Motion, Larson shows that the consequences of what happens when you flip stellar evolution around, making red giants the youngest stars and the blue giants the oldest. Backward evolution made for a perfectly logical and consistent pattern of evolution, eliminating the need for a bunch of devices that conventional astronomy introduced to try to make sense of their interpretation. Things like dark matter, energy, black holes, quark stars, neutron stars. When you put the sequence right, they all become just distinct stages in a single consistent stellar evolutionary process. As a consequence to setting the stellar evolutionary sequence date, some conclusions are different than popular beliefs. Stars start out as large dust clouds, condense into red supergiants, or yellow, orange giants, yellow, then white main sequence stars, and then on up to blue giants and supernova. The same process as heating up a piece of metal from the initial red glow to where it gets blue hot and breaks. Since stars are made from dust and debris as fuel, the more fuel available, the hotter the sun will get. And by the way, all of these, everything I'm telling you here has on the website, on this article, all of these things are documented and linked. As David Wilcock has identified in the past, planetary moons are leaving trails throughout the solar system, indicating we've entered a dusty area of space. With all this dust and debris available for solar fuel, the sun is growing in size and getting hotter, moving from a Class G yellow star to a Class F yellow-white star. Because our system of long-term dating is based on the assumption of radioactive elements being formed when Earth was born, not produced regularly, our system of geological era is drastically wrong. Astronomical events move thousands of times faster than assumed by astronomers. The planet and solar system are nowhere near as old as claimed, and mankind has been around to see the sun change in the past. When you consider these consequences from a corrective stellar evolution, one conclusion is obvious. Global warming is not due to flatulent cows, but to the fact the sun is getting hotter and will continue to get hotter. The sun heats in quantum steps, not a smooth transition. In the reciprocal system, everything is quantized into discrete units. So the case with the destructive limit, stars do not heat smoothly but tend to stay at a specified temperature, then suddenly jump to a new temperature range as the magnetic ionization level increases, which controls the age limit. This is why we have a distinct color temperature class system for identifying stars. The discrete jumps become very visible when you look at an HR diagram with the correct evolutionary sequence. As stars move from red supergiants to orange giants, to main sequence, distinct bars on the graph with few stars in between them. The earlier stages of heating up takes bigger jumps than the later ones, so that it is obvious here. The astronomers consider the giants to be separate from dwarfs because they do not realize the stars heat and condense in quantum steps. They assume a continuous change, so they miss the connection. Conventional understanding of radioactive elements needs some updating. In the RS, when you accelerate matter past the speed of light, it becomes radioactive. It emits radio waves while it's throwing up particles. That's why they call it radioactive. It has to do with the fact that the zone of isotopic stability inverts when you cross the speed of light. Atomic explosions in the stellar interior are violent enough to push motion beyond past the speed of light, something that cannot be accomplished by electromagnetic means and particle accelerators. For example, take U-236. Uranium is element number 92, so its natural mass is 184, twice the element number, and the remaining 54 units of mass are isotopic mass, an accumulation of mass, neutrons, that form the 236 isotope. Once U-236 is accelerated past the speed of light, the inversion takes place and the stable zone becomes 184.52, equaling 132. The atom has to throw off 104 units of mass to become stable and faster than light speed. This throwing off of isotopic mass is radioactive emission. If you think back to the days of Bob Lazar and his claim that UFO propulsion used element 115, well, 115 has a natural mass of 230 and an estimated mass of 288, meaning that there are 58 units of isotopic mass. 115 is highly unstable at speeds less than light, but it only has a mass of 172 at faster than light speeds, completely stable. Pull it out of the reactor though, and you'll be bombarded with X-rays to the point of glowing in the dark. This is why FTL drives are never shut down, which brings me to the reciprocal matter process, matter dropping from FTL at sublight speed. When the high-speed mass drops before the speed of light, it must reacquire the isotopic mass it lost. In U-236, the FTL mass was only 132. When it drops back to sublight speeds, that mass must increase up to 236 AMU, which is kind of backwards of radioactive emission on the other side of the speed of light boundary. The atom absorbs particles and emits X-rays, not radio waves, as it builds mass back. All elements dropping from FTL motion to sublight will emit X-rays, and all astronomical X-ray emitters are demonstrating this process, including our sun. Only sublight speeds in the sun are in the photosphere. Once you get deeper inside, the magnetic ionization is much higher, and the age limit destructions are constantly accelerating matter to FTL speeds, which is why the lower layers of the photosphere are a radio source. It is the boundary to faster than light motion. Every now and then the sun burps and some faster than light matter comes out from the core to the photosphere, immediately starts cooling and drops below the speed of light, generating a burst of X-rays and a rapidly expanding plasma or a coronal mass ejection. Because of the reciprocal relation, FTL motion is expanding in time, so compressing in space. When it drops sublight, that compression re-expands like a spatial explosion. So CMEs are a good indicator of how turbulent the core is at faster than light velocities. Now that you know that the reciprocal process of radioactive emission is an X-ray emission, and both have to do with crossing the faster than light boundary, sublight motion in 3D space to FTL motion in 3D time. FTL, faster than light acceleration, produces radioactivity. Deceleration produces X-rays. Time to put the pieces together. The sun is getting harder from all the dust and debris the solar system is now experiencing. We're passing through that. The increased fuel will increase the thermal destructive limit, which will cause a corresponding increase in magnetic ionization level, which will make more elements available for the stellar combustion process. The sun is going to get brighter and hotter. Initially, this will occur as bright flashes like a mini nova, until sufficient material is available to to hold the magnetic ionization Hang on a second. At that time, after you've seen this many novas, the sun will suddenly jump up in stellar class and remain there. Well, up in the reciprocal system, down in the conventional astronomy, since they have it backwards. The transition should be interesting. When the magnetic ionization level of the sun increases, it will be like throwing a cup of gasoline on the barbecue grills. A burst of flame and thermal activity so much that it will occur. It will move the thermal speeds past the speed of light. This inverse thermal emission actually occurs frequently on a small scale and is documented in the detailed and Professor K.V.K. Nehru's paper, Glimpses into the Structure of the Sun, the Solar Interior, and Solar Spots, Sunspots. That is the reason the sunspots are dark and appear cool, because inverse faster-than-light thermal reaction is super hot, so hot it appears cold, and the region of the sun where it takes place goes dark, as in the sunspot umbra. There are already indications of this beginning to occur, except this time the whole sun will become umbra. There will be a bright flash like a nova flare when the gas hits the fire. Additional elements will suddenly be being available for fuel. From the jump to in magnetic ionization, the sun will go dark like it went out, but only for a short time until the initial burst of fuel has burned up and the sun returns to zone of stability. Like most things, this has happened before and it will happen again. Also recall the radioactive transition. When the magnetic ionization increases, there will be a huge burst of radio waves as the material is accelerated faster than light along the nova flare. The sun will go dark faster than light motion, and when it starts to light up again, there will be a huge burst of X-rays from the sun and the possible ejection of a great deal of matter from the surface of the sun due to the re-expansion of FTL, thermal motion back to sublight speed. After the transition is complete, the sun will be physically larger, brighter, more white than yellow, and hotter than before. It's going to stay that way. One would think the situation will make the inner planets go up like marshmallows burning on the campfire, but curiously that is not the case. Seems that whoever designed stars and planets considered this and used the energy of transition to aid in further evolution of life. What will happen is that due to the increased FTL motion of the sun, the gravitational balances of the solar system will change. Faster than light motion is anti-gravitational, so the sun will literally push the planets further outward in their orbits in compensation. The year will get longer. Being further from the sun, the planets will survive and establish a new ecosystem, but a different. The changes in the sun will produce changes in the planets, particularly the electromagnetic alignment of the poles. As has been noted in geological records, the north and south poles of planets have been in various locations around the globe, not because the poles are moving, but the crust of the planet is moving relative to the mantle and the core. There will also be a high degree of probability that it will even trigger a core flare, an expansion of event of FTL matter and the core dropping. The expansion event of FTL matter in the core dropping to sublight speeds will cause the crust of the Earth to expand and open up teutonic borders, eventuating in more surface area and a drop in ocean levels as competition. In my opinion, says Daniel, the solar transition is the harvest or ascension to a new state of life on Earth. Not just man, all life on Earth, while the physical properties get kicked up a notch, as Emerald would say, commonly known as higher density or a higher dimension. So, if you were NASA or the powers that be, and knew the sun was getting constantly hotter, but did not know the specifics because you listen to conventional scientists. Let me see here. Hold on just a second here. Let me see what's going on here. Got to fix something here. So, you're NASA, but you knew the sun was getting hotter, but did not know the specifics because you listened to conventional science with their backwards stellar evolution. What would you be likely to do? Obviously, come up with a long-term strategy to deal with the excessive heat. Back in the 50s, a study was made on such a possibility and came up with 3 alternatives. Use nuclear weapons to blow holes in the upper atmosphere to let the increasing heat out, create huge underground cities to live in until the sun stabilized, or get the heck off Earth. The first one was a bit preposterous and could not be pulled off without public knowledge, so they started the second and third. The underground bunker approach was simple enough, as one of the features of HAARP, the high-frequency active auroral research program, was to be able to probe well beneath the surface of the Earth, looking for oil and mineral resources, but also identified huge caverns which would make excellent cities for them to stockpile and ride out the transition and comfort. Construction of these underground bunkers has been in progress for decades, and Alternative 2 is nearing completion. NASA came into existence shortly after this report was issued. Some believe that as a direct consequence of Alternative 3, their mission was to find out what was out there, and what they found was that mankind is not going anywhere else anytime soon. With Alternative 3 not viable, and knowing they will be stuck here with the rest of us, and not particularly wanting to live underground all their life, they needed to come up with a way to make their utopia on Earth, and that is geoengineering. Change this planet to be resistant to the solar changes they knew they were coming, and keep their corporatocracy going. Geoengineering is customizing the planet. That's right. That's right. The first thing they had to deal with was the sun getting a lot brighter from the combination of dust and debris, now present in significant quantities in the solar system. They needed to come up with a way to create a global dimming to to block off this bright light. Aluminum, a nice, lightweight, and very abundant element, works rather well, as most of our mirrors today are coated with aluminum, not silver, nanoparticles distributed in the troposphere some 7 miles up, would increase the albedo of the Earth and turn the upper atmosphere into a partially reflecting mirror. This has the result of global dimming on the surface. The next problem is the X-ray burst. The Van Allen belt protects the Earth from most particulate radiation that comes from CMEs, but that magnetic field barely slows down X-rays. Fortunately, back in the 50s, the technology became available that had to address the a similar problem, the cathode ray tube, or CRTs. The CRTs were a large X-ray emitter pointed right at the person watching the screen. To get this technology, they had to develop something to block out the X-rays but not interfere with the picture. They tried lead, but after being bombarded with X-rays for a while, the lead film turned brown, messed things up. It was okay for the sides of the tube, not the picture screen. Searching around, they found a couple of oxides that did an excellent job of blocking X-rays and stayed viable for a long time without browning out. That was a combination of barium and strontium. They also expect huge particulate radiation from both the CMEs and the solar heat up, so they looked for ways to create increase the magnetic flux in the upper atmosphere, which has been polarized now as magnetic reconnection, not a natural phenomenon. Aluminum, barium, and strontium are paramagnetic, and what was really needed was a ferromagnetic material. How about another popular material like iron? Might the sky and rain turn a bit reddish on occasion from iron oxide, but you could say the people who saw that were crazy. And what if the summer thunderstorms got massively more violent from the conductive metal in the atmosphere? Those would be called supercell storms. People don't pay attention to things like that, right? So they developed a technique to disperse aluminum, barium, strontium, and iron in the atmosphere using 10,000 plus aircraft that are in the sky every hour of the day. All they had to do was develop an aerosol and fuel additive and let her fly to get her done. Couple the aerosol dispersion system with the GPS global positioning system, and you can even control precisely where the chemicals get dumped without the pilots ever realizing anything is happening. If you look at the chemtrail fallout in snow, ice, and rain, what do you find? Aluminum oxide, barium oxide, strontium oxide, and iron oxide. The same elements listed on climate modification and geoengineering patents. What a coincidence. As to the question of global warming, yes, the planet is heating up. However, due to the global dimming created by the chemtrail project, that heating up has actually turned to a bit of cooling for a short time, because causing conspiracies thing to say the whole global warming thing was a farce. But if you've been outside lately, it's obvious the sun is significantly brighter than it used to be, particularly at higher elevation. And the chemtrail sunscreen is failing, though they constantly double out efforts to reinforce it. The experts are well aware of the sun becoming brighter and hotter, but you can't get the sun to pay carbon taxes for causing global warming. But if man is the global warming, then you've got yourself one major cash cow with carbon taxes, environmental research cleanup, breathing taxes, drinking taxes, waste reclamation taxes, to paraphrase Carl Sagan, billions and billions of bucks. The initial geoengineering work was done to block the solar changes and was just a temporary solution until the solar transition was complete. But like good humanitarians, the globalists saw a different picture. What if they destroyed the natural cycle and produced an artificial one that they were the sole supplier for? That way, the only way you could survive was to pay through the nose. The globalists have always profited on the pain and suffering of others, and this was no exception. They did not bother to put much research into the side effects of dumping millions of pounds of these elements into the atmosphere. They only considered the immediate need to protect from the solar transition and figured they could take care of the side effects later on. But here was a major opportunity in the form of disaster, pain, and suffering. A couple of the major side effects are drought and superstorms. One cannot tip the seesaw without having extremes. You're seeing that right now, folks, in New York. There are still thousands of people without power from a superstorm. Drought occurs in the area. They're being heavily seeded as these nanoparticles in the upper atmosphere form condensation. They form condensation nuclei for rain, but there's so many nuclei they never condense sufficient water for them to get heavy enough to fall out of the sky, at least not right now. They just stay up there as water vapor, drifting with the air currents, creating drought conditions below. Given enough exposure to moisture over time, they'll condense sufficiently to form rain. Due to the significant higher levels of nuclear, it will have a much higher rain density than a natural storm, so when it rains, it pours. The superstorm. This creates an unnatural dichotomy. On upwind, you will have drought. Downwind, you'll have excessive rain, and also the nanoparticle vapor could be knocked on the sky with an application of RF energy to shake things up a bit and cause condensation and rain. Thermal vibrations called collisions, and collisions have the tendency to merge particles. Experiments along this nature have been conducted by ARCO Power Technology over the years for weather modification that resulted in HAARP, which had all the tools to do this. These metals in the upper atmosphere are incredibly simple to control the weather. If you control the weather, you control the world. Controlling the world through the weather has its own side effects, and it tends to poison all life on Earth in order to keep things going and under their control. The genetic makeup of life